Good morning, frothers, and welcome back to another brew day at Wheatlow Brewery. And it's bright and early today. We've mashed in at 5 a.m. because we're excited to brew a famous beer from the north of England, and that beer is Theakston Best Bitter. Now, we recently toured around Theakston's on the 1,000-mile tour of Great British Breweries with Jamal, and saw firsthand many things at the brewery that have led us to be excited about these beers, and in particular, and I do remember particularly enjoying a few pints during the debrief of Theakston's Best Bitter. Of course, Theakston's probably most famous for Old Peculiar, and we'll be doing that in another video, and we'll be really putting a lot of effort into that recipe to try and get a real good clone of the beer. We're probably having a bit more of a lighter touch on the amount of research for Theakston's Best Bitter, but coming up on the channel, we'll be having a very deep dive indeed into Theakston's Old Peculiar, which is a world famous beer. So for this beer, and I was talking to Andy Leman from Timothy Taylor during the tour, and he said that it's amazing that most British Best Bitters are basically pale malt, crystal malt, and largely Fuggles and Goldings. Broadly speaking, many beers are like that, but it's amazing how varied and different British Best Bitters can be, even with such a limited palette of ingredients. A few other English hops, of course, but usually really is that simple. Now, this beer is along those lines. We're using pale malt, we're using crystal malt, but what we noticed when we went around Theakston's is that they use as their base malt Thomas Fawcett Pearl malt. So we're going to be using that as the base malt today, 83.1%, and then we're going to stick with Thomas Fawcett for the crystal malt. So we're using Thomas Fawcett crystal malt at 6.4%. That's 135 EBC, that particular crystal. You could use Simpson's medium crystal, which is 175-ish EBC, in which case you just need to reduce the quantity a little bit. And then for head retention, Theakston's use some torrefied maize and some torrefied wheat. So we've got 3.2% each of those. And we're going to stick with the theme of using my invert sugar number 2, since I've got such a big block of it, just a little bit, 4.1%. And then when we come onto the boil, we're going to be hopping with Challenger, Progress, Target and Fuggles at the end. So if you do look on the Theakston's website, I think it says there's a mixture of 5 hops. The missing hop from my recipe probably is Bramling Cross, but I'm happy with what we've got here. So that's Challenger. At 60 minutes we've got Challenger 8.8 IBUs, Progress 8.1 IBUs, and Target a little bit at 4.4 IBUs. And then at the end of the boil, we're going to stick in a bit of Fuggles, 3.3 IBUs, and then we're also going to whirlpool some Fuggles, 4.5 IBUs, which was to simulate the hopping that they most likely do at Theakston's. Theakston's weren't in the camp of the willing when it comes to giving out their recipes, but I think it would be good fun for us to have a go at this anyway. And then we've got, in terms of the yeast, they have a house yeast up there. When we walked into the fermentation room, Simon Theakston said, "What can you smell?" And I said, "Banana," which you could smell. But what I didn't notice is there's supposed to be a hint of black cherry to the yeast as well. Interesting house yeast, which we can't, of course, get. But what we can do is we can use Y Yeast 1469, the West Yorkshire strain, which I've already used actually for landlords. I've harvested the yeast off the top in the traditional style that we've seen as we've been around these breweries, in order to try and get the effect of both the banana and the black cherry. Then I'm mixing in actually this time a little bit of Windsor yeast, Lallemand Windsor, as well as the minor partner in the yeast arrangement. Hopefully that might give us a bit of each ester or something along those lines. And then we're going to use the whole thing effectively as a starter to create a nice healthy yeast pitch for the Old Peculiar, which we'll brew after this. Looking forward to this. We've already mashed in, so I'll put the brew footage on now, and I'll start weighing out my hops in a minute. Oh, and the water profile, again, we're not quite sure what it is. What we do know is that the water at Masham is relatively soft, and what we also know is there's some kind of Burtonisation. What I'm starting to realise is that Burtonisation as a word is not meaningless. It can mean a variety of things. Broadly speaking, it means that adding some salts, probably containing sulfates, to the water. The extent of it, it doesn't seem to mean that you're creating a 600 parts per million sulfate profile like Burton water. It just means you're adding some of those Burton salts to get it more along those lines. So it can more or less mean anything for the finished water profile. But what I'm guessing in this case, and it is a guess, and what I'm going with is sulfates at 150, chlorides at 120, so just slightly in favour of sulfates, but with a good chloride basis to boost up what is quite a malty beer as well. Balanced beer, but certainly the malt is there to balance the bitterness. And then calcium's at about 198, bit of magnesium and sodium in there. I'll put it on the screen here. So that's my guess at this water profile. It's just slightly in favour of sulfates over chlorides. And we'll be mashing today, slightly lower temperature than I normally do, because there's a certain dryness to Theakston's Best Bitter. So I've decided to just knock it down a notch to about 64 degrees in the mash rather than 66, just to try and create a little bit of dryness, a bit of moorishness on the palate. So it'll be interesting to see if that makes a difference to the finished beer. So we better get cracking, and I'll come back in a minute. Because we're using a repitched yeast, I'm just going to put 2 grams of yeast nutrient in at the end of the boil just to sterilise it, and that will just help that liquid yeast get going better. If you're using dried yeast, fresh pitch, it's not necessary, but when you're repitching yeast, yeast nutrient is quite important, I think. So I always pop in a bit in, and then we also need some fuggles for the end of the boil, which I've got in pellet form here. That's for the last 10 minutes of the boil. Protofloc, yeast nutrient, and some fuggles. And then I'm also going to put some fuggles in the whirlpool, and a bit of a nod to the tradition that they use at Theakston's, which is all leaf hops. I'm going to use leaf hops for that. All the hop additions, if you're talking about getting the delicacy out of the hops from the leaf and really tasting the difference between a leaf hop and a pellet hop, then the final addition in the hop back or whirlpool is surely the one where we need to be the most accurate. So that will be my whirlpool addition of leaf hops. Super. Right, I need 850 grams of invert number 2 from my big block. The invert number 2 sugar will do 2 things. It will add a bit of colour, 3 things actually: a bit of colour, because it's 60 odd EBC. It will add some flavour as well. It tastes a little bit like muscovado sugar, so it'll be a little bit sort of toffee-like, those kind of flavours. And also, because it's invert sugar, it means it's very readily fermentable, so it'll kick the yeast off to a flying start. So quite a common ingredient in traditional British beers, which is why I've indulged myself and got a big 25 kilo block. So I'll put away now. Right, end of the boil. So I've got my little sausage of Fuggle whole leaf, so I'll stick that in now. Right, now I've got here, in this big bucket, the yeast that I skimmed off the top of my landlord, which was Yeast 1469. I've left it in a bucket. I made a massive concession to modern hygiene standards and put a lid on it and put it in the cold room. So hopefully it's okay. But what I intend to do is do two things. One is to add this bit of malt extract that I've just boiled and cooled. And the other is to add a couple of sachets of Lallemand Windsor yeast, which will hopefully give us some of the fruity esters that we're looking for in conjunction with this 1469. You don't have to do that, you could just use the 1469, but I'm really gearing up for getting the old peculiar right, and in order to do that I'm trying to build up this dual strain pitch. So let's just smell and see if it's okay. Got the yeast floating on the top as it was in the fermenter still. So these old-fashioned strains that are suitable for this top cropping, they really form a layer of yeast on top of the beer, on top of the wort, that just stays on top. So when you rack it off, the yeast will still be on top and it'll come down the fermenter. And it's almost like a protective crust. So it's one of the reasons the open fermentation is so successful, is because that yeast doesn't actually then sink through the beer. So any contamination is on the top of that yeast and it never ever goes in the beer that you rack from below. So not all ale yeasts are like that, notwithstanding the fact that they're top fermenting. If you use something like USO5 or SO4 or something like that, and you looked in your fermenter, I don't think you'd see a layer of yeast on top at the end of fermentation. But these old English ale strains, such as 1469, such as the Hook Norton strain that we used, they do seem to do that. So when I put a video on Instagram of jugging this yeast into this bucket, people were going mad saying you're just going to get an infection and all that sort of thing. So hopefully that's not the case. It smells nice enough anyway. We will do a few modern hygiene techniques, such as sanitizing hands with this alcohol and the scissors as well, and a bit around the neck of this. Give that a swirl. And the idea is basically to activate this to make sure that it's in good health before we stick it in the main beer. Pour it from a bit of a height to get the oxygen in. Bit of swirl. Pour this Windsor yeast in now. So hopefully there's about 5 litres in there, so hopefully that'll be a decent pitch. It wasn't all solids. The going rate for sludge is roughly 1 litre per hectolitre. So I need therefore 1.3 litres of actual sludge. So I don't think I'm going to be far off with 5 litres of liquid here 2 litres of which I've just put in. So there was 3 before, and there was probably half sludge and half not sludge. So highly scientific. Smells okay. I'll put the lid back on. And hopefully I'll leave it out in the warmth, well, the room temperature, and hopefully that will just get frothing a bit before we put it in. Frothing yeast. Right, less than an hour later, just checking on the yeast. Smells great, and it's right up to 10 litres, so it's frothed right up, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. It's gone active, it's gone frothy, and it's ready to ferment this beer. Super. Right, the yeast is still frothing up and increasing in volume. It's up to about 14 litres now. And what's interesting is I reckon I can smell a hint of black cherry in there, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now, okay, I might be imagining it because I want it to be there, but just because I'm excited. But, I mean, I've never imagined black cherries before when I've been excited. So it must be right. Super. Brew day's done. It's in this fermenter behind me with the lid off. That's what it looks like. Could be a touch pale, not quite sure from memory. Tastes, as you'd expect, a bit sweet, bit bitter. Now I've got the yeast to put in, and just look at how great that looks. Frothy, yeasty, smells good. Give it a whirl. And as usual, I'm going to have to take 20 litres out and put it in this bucket, otherwise it's just going to overflow. So I'll run that in now. And hopefully that'll get going pretty quickly. I might just cover it with a cloth now until it gets going. Gravity's come out a touch under 1037 rather than 1038, but I think that's near enough really. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long this takes to get started. It's 11 a.m. now, finished. Right, we're almost exactly 24 hours in to the Theakston Best Bitter, and it's got a lovely frothy head. I've got it fully open now. I just covered it with a lab coat overnight until it got established, but it's established now, so it's time to rouse the yeast, which is something that they do in Yorkshire. Certainly they did it at Timothy Taylor. It's ideal for these Yorkshire yeasts. It's traditional in Yorkshire squares with Samuel Smiths and people like that. And what they would normally do is actually take it from the very bottom of the fermenter and spray it with a fantail or fishtail on top of the wort to mix in the yeast that's already on top, to mix the air back in to help yeast reproduction, and to generally mix up the yeast into the wort as well so that it ferments it and gets the fermentation off to a better start. So I've got here a nice big jug and 5 litre jug, which is really useful. You dip it in the hot liquor tank at 83 degrees just to help sanitize it a little bit, and I'm going to spray it as well, inside and out of course, because we're going to stick it in, hand as well, and I'm just going to scoop it out, not just the froth, the liquid as well, and pour it in. And knocking the CO2 out of the wort actually also helps with the yeast reproduction. If the wort's saturated with CO2, then it moves to its anaerobic stage and there's no more reproduction. So the oxygen going in from this agitation and the expellation of the CO2 both help with increasing. Oh, it smells absolutely delicious. Now, does it smell of banana and black cherries? Not getting any banana, possibly some black cherry. Sometimes they say that you have to stress a yeast to give it banana. And actually we've only got this at 18.5 degrees now, so we're also going to step the temperature up, because you do get better ester formation, don't you, at slightly warmer temperatures. And certainly 18's on the low side, so we can afford to go up a bit. So getting quite full with froth here. So that'll probably do for now, and I can do it. At Timothy Taylor they do it every 4 hours for a couple of days, so certainly we can do it a few times. I'll turn the temperature up as well, perhaps another degree, and then we'll probably put it up another degree tomorrow, something like that. Right, time to harvest the yeast off the Theakston Best Bitter. It's 1010 gravity now, and I've got a sanitised bucket and a sanitised jug and a sanitised hand, and I'm going to just try and scoop it off the top and use this again for the Old Peculiar. And although it's froth, it's heavy because it's got yeast in it. You can feel the weight of the yeast in the froth. So hopefully when that settles down I'll have at least 1.5 litres of sludge, which is what I want for my ratio of 1 litre of sludge per hectolitre repitch level. Right, I've had the Theakston Best Bitter cooling down for a couple of days. I've covered it up since I harvested the yeast just to protect it a little bit with that cloth, and I'm now racking it into the casks. It tastes delicious. I've had a little taste. Tastes quite like what I remember Theakston Best Bitter to taste like. It is hazy at the moment, no problem. So I'm putting it in. It's cold. It's 4 degrees. It's going into the cask flat and cloudy. I'm going to add some finings, some silicon dioxide, and that's it. No priming, as usual. And in a few days' time, should be ready to drink. So I'm keeping an eye on the weight. I need 41 kilos in a 9-gallon cask. It's a 3.8% bitter, so I'm not bothering with pins on this one. We'll smash these 9s in no time. Super. Theakston Best Bitter, I forgot to put in a dry hop. Remember when we went round Theakston, we saw the little plugs of hops that they use, which is a very compact leaf. Easy to put in a cask, unlike loose leaf hops. I've guessed that the amount of 10 grams, not quite sure how much those little plugs weigh, possibly 15 grams, half an ounce, but I'm going to try and get these in. Now these have been standing for about 2 days in the relative warmth, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to react to being opened. Yeah, a small hiss, but not Vesuvian. Hopefully they'll be fine now with the dry hops in. I don't think I'd have lost too much condition by just opening them. Yeah, I can get them in the cellar now, I think. Right, fast forward a couple of weeks after casking, and it's time to have a taste. And as we pour the beer, you'll see that it's pouring that dark golden colour with the thick, creamy Yorkshire head that Simon Theakston referred to last week. and we've got not one but two special visitors coming to taste this beer. We're having a bit of a Theakston night, and we're going to have Rob from the Malt Miller tasting it, giving us his opinion, and we're going to have a cask of the real Theakston's Best, and we're going to have our Theakston Best on draft, and we're going to have them both on the hand pull and see what the taste comparison's like. We're also highly honoured to have persuaded Richard Bradbury, the MD from Theakston, to actually come down and taste the two beers as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And when the day came, it was 33 degrees centigrade, so it wasn't exactly ale weather, and it certainly wasn't Old Peculiar weather, which we were tasting on the same night. But anyway, we managed to taste a few beers. So, Theakston's Best Bitter. This is homemade, and that is the real one. So, colours almost there, isn't it? A bit paler on the homemade.
Even though brewing at your size is kind of much closer to commercial side, the even bigger volume makes a big difference.
Yeah, and they've got an internal calandria, so that'll darken it a little bit, won't it? It's a very hot day today, isn't it?
It's positively sweltering.
I'm not looking forward actually to trying the Old Peculiar on 32 degree heat.
I think that yours tastes a bit cleaner.
Yeah, it's got I suppose it's the yeast, isn't it? Because they've got a house yeast. Probably the difference.
Yeah, because it's definitely this is more estery.
Yeah.
Yeast estery.
They say that their yeast gives banana and cherry, but this is more like bready type stuff, isn't it? Would you say or not?
Yeah, and it's slightly buttery as well.
Yeah, that's a good word. It is, isn't it? I think it's quite close.
No, I don't think it's quite close. I think it's very close. Really? And I think the only thing for me, the only difference is that butteriness.
Yeah.
And that's if you've not got their yeast.
Well, I have now.
because now you've got the cask.
I've got the cask, so a bright barreled wrapped the cask of Old Peculiar into another, and as when it was fresh when I first opened it, and I'm propagating it up now. So as long as it's okay, then it'll be.
To rebrew this using their yeast, and to know how their yeast behaves as well.
It could be interesting. And we'll try the Old Peculiar in a bit. But I think, if you drank it on your own, you could be convinced that was Theakston's Best Bitter. If it wasn't side by side. It's got that lovely Moorishness to it. Theakston's Best Bitter has that just makes you, even after 5 pints, you want more, don't you? You don't get sick of it.
Have you measured the finishing gravity of the original?
No, I haven't done that.
Interesting.
I have on the Old Peculiar. It's 1014.
Is it?
Yeah. Mine finished at 1017. So it's a point or two lower in alcohol.
But you say they use sugar in that?
Yeah, well, I used sugar, but I didn't have any caramel.
Yeah. Once again, a cracking job.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've finished the homebrew first, so that's normally a good time.
Yeah.
Cheers, anyway.
Cheers.
Nice to see you.
And you.
Frothy ale.
Anyway, I was thinking that a bit earlier, 30 degree heat, it's not natural casting.
It's not Old Peculiar weather, is it?
But the heavens opened and
now it's just a bit
about,
pressure, I'm still perspiring. I've got a towel, but just not sure. So this is your platter.
Yeah.
And on your left is my best bitter.
Yeah.
B is your best bitter.
Yeah.
C is my OP, and D is your OP.
Okay.
Yeah, see what you think.
Okay.
I should say, by the way, sorry, this is Richard Bradbury, who's MD of Theakstons, so welcome to Wheatlow Brewery.
Cheers, Richard. Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you. Thanks for making the
Nice to be here.
come down.
Yeah. Nose is good. Very slightly lighter, I would say, but we have a spec, so it's probably within spec, but slightly lighter than ours.
Could have done with the spec, that would have helped me.
It's good, very drinkable, very drinkable.
Cheers, Andy. Good to see you.
So ours is slightly sweeter on the start.
Yeah, Rob from Malt said he thought it was a bit buttery.
Yes.
I think the house yeast obviously contributing a lot to it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good. You've done well there. I think you're doing really well. Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, I didn't have any info on it really.
No.
I just had to.
So how did you? What process did you go to try and?
Well, I had a look at some old books and things like Graham Wheeler's book from 20, 30 years ago as a starting point, and then I know that you used the pearl. And I know that it's Thomas Fawcett, so I thought that's probably medium crystal. And then I used invert sugar number 2 because I saw it there. And then I sort of guessed the hop. Oh, I think you list the hops on your website. Although you do say that Old Peculiar's got roasted barley in it on the website, so you do have to take these things with a pinch of salt. So obviously I didn't know how many hops and when, but I knew there were some in the hop back, I think, so I put some in.
So we use 5 hop varieties on Best.
Right. Let me see what I actually used. So I used Challenger, Progress, Target, and then Fuggles. So I've missed one out.
You missed Rambling Cross.
Rambling Cross, right,
But you've got the other 4 you've got on,
And I only used Fuggles at the end, actually. And how should I put it? I got the impression when we were going around with Simon that everything was dry hop, so I've done a dry hop in this as well. But when I opened my Old Peculiar, there weren't any hops in it. So perhaps you don't dry hop in the cask now.
We don't dry hop Old Peculiar. No.
But does this have a dry hop in one? Okay, so I put Fuggles in the cask.
I think it's I think to try and do that from visiting the brewery, observation, and then going out and working out how to do it yourself, I think you've done a really good job.
Thank you. It's good fun. It's a game of trying to hone it in now. And of course, what I think is really good, because if we were just standing here drinking this, and not comparing it side by side with the actual cask, not a bottle, that's the key. So because as a brewer now I can taste them side by side, I can see what the difference is and maybe tweak it a little bit closer for next time. Thanks for selling me the casks.
Cheers.
Good on. Well, the tasting night went absolutely fantastically, and everybody really loved my version of Theakston Best, and I think it was really quite accurate, and certainly a lot of people enjoyed it on the night. It was really good to have both Rob there and Richard from Theakston to give his expert opinion on it, and I think I probably passed the test from him on this occasion anyway. Before we wrap up today's video, we're just going to talk a little bit more about the tour, the 1,000-mile tour of the UK with Jamal. And Jamal was great company. The tour was 10 days. I'd only met him for 1 day before that. I had a great time. It was really interesting. We learnt a lot. And Jamal's a very easygoing, good company kind of a chap to have with you on such a tour. And he's also a very fine brewing mind. Been in a car with him for hours on end, travelling from place to place, gave us a chance to just talk endlessly about beer. I wished we'd recorded more of it, but when we finally thought it was a good idea, we recorded some of it as those car podcasts. And he had, of course, has no difficulty absorbing all the information we were learning at the breweries about the beer, about the history and everything else. But there was just one element of English beer culture that he did struggle to get to grips with. And we first found out about this when we arrived after a very long drive in Keighley, and with just 15 minutes to closing time, we arrived at the pub.
Estamos na cidade da Timothy Taylor e o Richard chegou com sede. Are you thirsty? Ele virou o primeiro copo em 1 segundo. No, you don't need to do this anymore. That's enough, Richard. Stop! Please stop! No. You must taste the beer, Richard. Don't do this. Have my... Então a gente está aqui em um pub na cidade que só tem Simon Taylor. E tem uma convidada que é a Old Peculiar, famosíssima. Talvez o maior motivo de eu estar aqui no norte da Inglaterra é visitar essa cervejaria. E olha, estamos aqui num pub que vai fechar daqui a pouco. A gente chegou 9h30 da noite e o Richard doido. Falou, pega um Uber, vamos lá que a gente tem que tomar uma. Faz 10 minutos que a gente está aqui, ele já tomou 4 copos de cerveja, 2 pints e 2 half pints, então 3 pints de cerveja. Mas tem que falar, olha eu aqui, olha como competir com isso, olha a diferença. Eu, o Richard. It's like me and you had another one.
Yeah, you skipped a whole pint.
Yeah. Mas é que eu tomei essa Dark, a Stout deles, que eu quero entender essa cerveja aqui, por isso que eu não tô tomando tão rápido. Cara, não é à toa que muitos consideram essa a melhor cervejaria da Inglaterra, porque tudo aqui é muito bom.
And then on the last night of the tour, where we'd been to Theakston in the day, we'd had a drink with Richard, Simon Theakston and Mark Slater, the brewer, in the brewery tap afterwards, and then we decided to retire to the Theakston pub next door and debrief on both the trip and the day at Theakston.
Nossa, eu jamais poderia, nos meus melhores sonhos, imaginar essa experiência que a gente acabou de ter. Eu não estava gravando, fiquei meio constrangido, mas nós estávamos bebendo aqui com o Simon Theakston, seu cervejeiro, o Mark, e seu administrador, o outro Richard. O Richard está aqui agora comigo e a gente está tomando as últimas cervejas. Eu estou tomando agora a Session Pale Ale. Que experiência incrível. Então, assim a gente termina mais um dia incrível. Se bem que é só 4h30 da tarde ainda, tem muita coisa para acontecer. It's just 4:30. There are a lot of things to happen today, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the difference is, I've drank my beer. Jamal hasn't.
But I just got this beer.
Yes, so did I.
King.
So, what did you think then of Theakston's today?
I couldn't imagine a better tour because Simon Theakston himself gave us the tour, and I know he's not a brewer, but he's in business for his whole life. And he knows the tradition, and he knows, we are always wondering if this is a crisis on craft beer we are living. And it was like this chill, like, you know what? I passed through this like for 5 times in my life, sometimes people are interested in this kind of beer and then don't, and then again, and it keeps going and going, and
Yeah, that was very interesting, very sage advice, because
we just keep doing our job. Yeah.
he lived through the 60s and had all the keg beers make cask ale decline, and then the 70s when camera kicked in and made cask beer boom a bit. They had a busy time, and COVID and craft beer boom and what have you.
Yeah, there was like 4 or 5 times that it happened in his lifetime. That was booming or contracting, and he was like, yeah, the one thing we can do is keep brewing the best beer we can.
Yeah, that was a good moment. Yeah.
I wish I recorded that. I didn't. But you did.
I did. Yeah.
Great beers, amazing beers actually. One of the best beer I had so far. Really balanced, not that dry, more
Good head retention, lacing. But the problem we've got, Jamal, and this has become evident as the trip's gone on, is that my glass is constantly empty.
mine is half. You know what?
What's
I'm drinking
delay?
the mile.
But it doesn't really excuse you for not drinking it.
I'm kind of dizzy now.
Dizzy?
Yeah. This is our breakfast. This is like 6 in the afternoon, 6 p.m.
Yeah.
I can't even speak anymore. And you keep saying, don't drink. I had like 2 liters of beer so far, and I didn't even have breakfast.
This is liquid bread, remember? That's what we heard at some of the breweries.
We are
is
liking
liquid
this.
bread. But no, we didn't have any breakfast or lunch just because of how the schedule worked out today.
We
2
are like
breweries in
in
one
this
day.
monk routine, that monk fasting, right?
Yeah.
Because
It is Lent.
and
despite endless training and encouragement, the theme persisted. Why are you falling behind all the time?
because you don't taste the beer. You must taste the beer.
When you're in England, you've got to drink beer like an Englishman. An Englishman comes in from work, he has a 3.8% beer, like this, and it quenches his thirst, and he drinks it fast.
Like just like in one chug, like
Not one shot, but tasting it is optional.
taste is optional, but
The theme of Jamal not embracing British drinking culture emerged more and more as the evening went on. Right, are we having another beer?
yeah.
Why not? So do you think the UK trip this time's been a success for you?
I couldn't ever imagine a better trip. Everywhere we went, we had like the owner showing the place to us and all this tradition, and way more than you could taste in the glass, but because we live the history of the English beer.
When you go around the brewery with the owner or the head brewer or whatever, and you hear every nuance, every little thing about what the history of the beer is and why they're doing things. When you taste it after the tour, I mean, we would if we had some. Then it tastes so much nicer because you know the story of the beer, and storytelling in beer is so important.
Yeah, you know everything around the beer, more than just the beer itself, and it plays a huge role. Yesterday when we was coming here, we asked questions on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And there was this guy that asked, after 10 pints,
10 pints, can Richard speak Portuguese?
Good question.
You can say chupa.
Chupa.
Chupa is a catchphrase from Richard, which it means super in English, but in Brazilian Portuguese means suck. Literally.
But Jamal, what would you like in terms of beer then? If you were empty, like your glass was empty,
Again.
what would you say?
Like this. This is not fair.
I mean, I just need some advice.
How long did it take? We are recording. We can.
2
This
minutes.
is not fair. 2 minutes. This is
How
not
long
fair.
do you need?
Hello.
But mine is more malty.
We've been talking
how-
all
how-
week
how-
about how this beer is drinkable. Prove it.
And
You want me to chug out this beer?
No, just enjoy it. You don't have to rush it. Just drink it.
Fair enough. Oh, fair enough.
Beer's there for drinking, not for.
What are you drinking, that one?
Começou aplicação numa frase, o que isso quer dizer. E you shouldn't drink this fast, Richard.
What's up?
You must drink water. Nice to meet you.
The problem is that Jamal doesn't like beer and he doesn't have a thirst.
I had like over 10 pints for breakfast today.
I've been trying to explain to Jamal that how we drink English beer. So this is a classic. 3.4, 3.8, 4%.
Querendo explicar pra mim como que se bebe cerveja inglesa, 3.4, 3.5%.
Look at it. Mine's empty, but look at Jamal's pint. Delicious, creamy head, golden colour, and the carbonation is so low. The temperature's perfect. It's cold, but it's not freezing. It's 12 degrees. I know that's hot in Brazil, but here this is like cold. And it's just, I could drink Jamal's now. I'm quite tempted to drink it.
You can drink half of my pint, please.
We should
I'm gonna help
drink
you.
like an Englishman. No, you can't. You can never do that. Anyway, thanks for watching again today. Loads more to come from the channel. We've still got Theakston's Old Peculiar to do, of course, and we've got Landlord to do. We've got Warminster Maltings to do. We've got Harvey's. Still loads more to come on the channel in the coming weeks, so stay tuned to Wheatlow channel. Subscribe, like, and let us know in the comments what you thought of this lot, and we'll see you next week for some more frothy ale.